Hi folks, good evening. This is actually going to be a short live. It's not going to be a long live. I'm just going to do a brief wrap up and roundup of the current political scenario. But I know that people have been waiting for me to say stuff for quite some time, and that's why I wanted to do the live this evening. So I'm making sure, I'm telling all from now, it's not a long live. All right, so we ain't going for an hour, we ain't going for 2 hours. I'm even sure we're going for half an hour. But before I jump into it, let me say hi to Anne from Toko. Let me say hi to Ruth, Lenley's, Stacy, Empress C, Jared, Trisha, Stephanie Fraser, Marissa, Marissa Ramnath Garabdas. Nice to see you. Evening. Chantal, Paulette, Janelle Beth, Kimora, Jennifer Nathan, all of my New Source followers and my New Source family. So the first thing I should explain is why I haven't done a live for the year. Very simple. Political interference. There's been so many things that have happened between December of last year to now that I would have commented on, posted on, and it caused a lot of problems for people. But we're going to get into that shortly. So this evening's theme, erectile dysfunction. We're looking at elections 2025, and the ways in which it seems to be problematic for both parties. The UNC, on the wrong side here, let me fix this. The UNC is facing a collapse. I'm sure you would have seen that between last year to now, there have been a significant number of resignations and people pulling out from the party, resigning from the party in a range of ways. I had actually thought that by now, Dinesh Rambali, and Anita Haynes may have resigned from the party, but they have not yet resigned from the party. What that means is the United National Congress is both weak as an opposition, like within a governance structure, and they're also extremely weak as a political party. It also means that they have constricted their base considerably. So instead of being in a position where they can offer themselves as a viable option to the entire country, it appears now as if they're only likely to be a viable option for their base. That being said, the United National Congress is usually 18 seats strong, and 18 seats is a lot of seats, which means that this general elections is, I misspoke. This general erections 2025 is focused on marginal seats. So that's why the opposition would have jumped out in Toko, Sandy Grande, and put Wayne Sturge there. And they were hoping that Wayne Sturge would have created more noise and furor in Toko, Sandy Grande. More so the Sandy Grande side of the Toko Sandy Grande seat. Because the Toko side of the Toko Sandy Grande seat tends to be very strongly PNM in terms of how it votes, right? Especially when they had Terry Rondon there as councillor. So I don't know if his passing has had a serious impact on how the seat is likely to vote in terms of the demographics of the seat. So Wayne Sturge is one. Then Kamala was also hoping that the lawyer that she has challenging Terrence Dayal Singh in St. Joseph was going to make a stir as well. So you would have noticed that when she started first announcing candidates, she would have announced candidates for most of the marginal seats. San Fernando West, St. Joseph, Toko Sandy Grande, and I'm trying to remember which other marginal. Either which way, the marginals are where she is focusing a lot of her attention, because she feels certain that the usual 16 to 18 seats that she tends to win, she's going to win because of how our voting demographics occur, right? As you know, with tribal voting. And that's where the PNM's current campaign, is interesting. Because what they're trying to do, I don't know if you all saw the ads in the fake ads that were circulating yesterday, giving you the list of UNC people that have resigned. So not just this image here, I should say this image, this image here. Also a long list of the 20-something persons, or however many persons, that have resigned from the party within the last 3 months or so. And the language, the messaging in those ads were there basically speaking to the, I guess, the middle class of the UNC voting base, basically pointing out this is what the party tends to attract, right? Either people who are corrupt, people with criminal track records, etc., etc., etc. That basically the party has no standards. Is this what you want to be associated with? And so that's the strategy from the PNM versus the UNC. The UNC has decided that it's going to go for tried and tested, flagrant race baiting, which is unfortunate because flagrant race baiting doesn't win it votes. And if it's planning to grab any of those marginal seats, then it has to win votes. It has to put itself into a position where it's appealing to not just its regular base in, whether it's St. Joseph, Toko, Sangre Grande, Tunapuna, and whichever other marginal seats it's targeting. It has to put itself in a position where it can appeal to people from across the spectrum. And it's not doing that. And because Kamala has focused so much on race baiting, what I'm also noticing is that they are attempting to run a voter suppression campaign. And so there is a whole, can you say what the PNM has done for you in the last 10 years? With the hope that that is going to target a working class PNM base, maybe even the middle class PNM base voters, so that they don't show up and vote come April 28th. So April 28th is soon, coming right round the corner, right? I mean, all you see the pace that taking place with respect to vote, with respect to rollout of campaigns. So the PNM would have done its campaign rollout. But before we get to the campaign rollout, I should indicate that we have a new Prime Minister. So Dr. Rowley would have announced late December, early January, that there was going to be a change up, a transition. And I'm sure all of you watching here know that I am not in agreement with how that transition took place. I felt that the PNM has processes, it has structures for how it goes about selecting a political leader. And so appointing a new Prime Minister, as opposed to going through the process of selecting a new political leader and then having that person face the PNM electorate for one man, one vote, and thereafter, with the support of the party, then the transitioning over into the prime ministership. I felt that that is what ought to have taken place. It didn't take place. People had their own opinions. I shared my opinion on a number of occasions. And my opinion, apparently, was extremely problematic for a number of persons. So, on Monday, the 16th of March, Richard Young would have been sworn in as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. So, we have a new Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Richard Young. So, congratulations to Richard Young on becoming the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And I hope that your tenure as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Richard Young, is a successful tenure as Prime Minister, and that all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, from every sphere and every sector, benefits from your tenure as Prime Minister. I want to hope that it is not going to be a situation where only one sector, one sphere, one group of people benefit from your tenure as Prime Minister. Barbara, I didn't stutter, I didn't misspeak. Richard Young is the new Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I know precisely why I'm saying what I'm saying. So, with the arrival of a new Prime Minister comes the issue of performance anxiety. With the new Prime Minister came a shuffle in the cabinet, a reshuffle of the cabinet. And so we have new ministers, or rather I should say we have a lot of MPs that have moved around and they've been given different portfolios. We also have at least one new person coming into the cabinet. We've got Vishnu Danpal, who I know very well. He was the former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance, and he was there when Imbert was still Minister of Finance. So he is somebody that I have interacted with. Very intelligent, very sharp, very easy person to work with in terms of interaction and communication, and I wish him only the absolute best for his tenure as the Minister of Finance. He's been extremely instrumental in, budgets and policy making. So I am hoping that he continues to be fair, balanced, and innovative with his policy making as he has taken on this role and this particular mantle. So, hot on the heels of the new Prime Minister came these allegations. Now, everybody was arguing online and saying, this is the first time they're hearing about it. This is not the first time I heard about it. As a matter of fact, when Stuart Young became an MP back in 2015, these stories started to resurface. So I am aware of the allegations of bullying resurfacing as far back as 2015. As a matter of fact, I'd even raised it with MP Young back then and said, well, these are some of the things people have said, and we'd had a conversation about it, and he gave his version of events, which was I think the version that Ria Tate eventually published in the newspaper on Tuesday, that talked about the attack from the bully on him. I didn't hear the previous stories until a couple years later, when fellas who had been at Saints talked about the entire event and the incident and what had taken place. So it wasn't news to me. What was, I guess, news or shocking was that on the heels of the swearing in, this story comes up. I don't think that this story is an irrelevant story. And I don't think it's an irrelevant story because it helps to give you context into the person. And so how he would have treated with the story resurfacing also helps to give you a sense of the individual, a sense of the type of leadership to expect from the individual. And so while I wasn't hardcore into going into the story in any significant way, I felt that it was an important discussion for the public to have, and it was also an important bit of analysis for the public to apply to a current leader. And it's not the first time that stories have been dug up about leaders. Everybody does be hearing stories about Kamala and her drinking habits and other habits, right? And we make assessments about Kamala on the basis of those things. The same thing happened to Dr. Rowley. The same thing happened to Patrick Manning. The same thing happened to Basil Pandey. The same thing happened to George Chambers. Same thing happened to Eric Williams. Stories about their upbringing, stories about their personal life get into the public domain, and the public uses that information against which they make assumptions, they make assessments, they make determinations about people. It's the same thing you all would do with me and pretty much anybody else. You hear stories about people and you kind of like, okay, all right, let me see, right? And you make your assessments. So there was the bullion story. It became a thing, and I was careful to point out the story have backstory, the story have context. It can't just be Rhea Tate's version of the story, because there was a whole generation of CIC men who were present, who witnessed what occurred, and who can give you a much wider and wide-ranging story than the version that Rhea Tate put into the Express. And I'm sure you all saw the various stories. Ian Lee, you're catching kicks off of me. You see your girl trying to be very careful, very demure, very mindful, because I know when I am not careful, when I'm not demure, when I'm not mindful, man just get attacked, right? So my boy was moved from the Ministry of Finance and moved over to the Ministry of Public Utilities. And the reason I raised this particular issue, because I mean other people got different portfolios, is that the backstory of what has been happening with respect to internal screening and internal affairs within the People's National Movement is partly why I have not done a live for the year. It's partly why I have not been in a position to talk about politics and current affairs for the year. And that's because when the whole transition to new leadership took place or began to kick off, the sitting government felt that I shouldn't say anything about it. The sitting government felt that I should shut up. The sitting government was unable to make a distinction between me, an opinionated black woman, and this guy here. Why am I not pointing in the right direction? So the sitting government felt that when I spoke, it meant that Imbert spoke. The sitting government somehow felt that I was not capable of having independent thoughts, independent ideas, independent assessments on anything at all. So in short, anything that I was saying had to be something that Imbert was saying. And so Imbert faced a significant amount of backlash because I tend to be outspoken on current affairs. We're going to get back to this whole business of backlash and who facing backlash. So there are a couple things that you all need to pay attention to for this election. I went down to Woodford Square. I went down to the launch of the candidates. The crowd size was not massive. The crowd was, squished into a particular area. And the crowd size was not massive because the PNM is having problems mobilizing voters. So there is a hope that within the next 6 weeks, they will be able to mobilize not just their base, but people who are not their base as well, right? And so that way, there will be the kind of turnout that they need for elections day. The new Prime Minister also has challenges in that the new Prime Minister does not necessarily have the broad general support within the party because of how power transition occurred. The new Prime Minister also has to come to you, the base, and outline his ideas and his policies, not just for his group of persons, but for everybody. And there are challenges there, right? The new Prime Minister also is concerned about tenure within the party because of the way in which transition would have happened. And all of these are things that nobody wanted me to talk about. All of these are things that were utilized and as leverage when it came to me discussing and posting things in the public domain. So currently, the messaging that is being put out is that we're going into a new era under the PNM, right? New chapter versus Kamla Prasad Bisesa being the same old story. Nothing wrong there. This is actually very useful messaging. New chapter, agreed. Kamla, same old story, agreed. I couldn't vote for the UNC. I wouldn't vote for the UNC. My concerns, though, would be the support for Minister Young. My concerns are whether or not Minister Young is representing everybody or the financiers. I've been very, 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 very straightforward about that. Those are my concerns. When I saw the announcement being made about freeing up Forex for the business community, I got very concerned about that because it is the business community that has been hoarding Forex overseas. So when we take the limited Forex that we already have here and we provide greater access to that limited Forex to the business community that has been hounding and harassing and bullying people to give them more Forex over the last 10 years, what then happens to the rest of us if they take that Forex and continue to hoard that Forex overseas? And this Forex hoarding issue is something that I have discussed with many people in the Ministry of Finance, past and present. They know the nature of the problem. They know where and how the Forex is leaking. They know how the Forex is ending up in offshore accounts, overseas accounts, and buried in overseas properties as well. So when you take the Forex that has been guarded heavily for the last 9 to 10 years, and you come and say, we're going to make more of this Forex available to the business class, who being represented? And that's just one issue that I saw that had me concerned, right? So I'm not going into in a deep way. And you know why I'm not going into it in a deep way? Because people facing backlash over me discussing something like that with you all. So we're going to discuss my pullout game. And we're discussing my pullout game because I've made the choice. So this is my personal choice, right? I've made the choice to be quiet until April the 29th. And I've made the choice to be quiet until April the 29th because there are people who are currently being bullied. And they're being bullied because of association with me. They are being harassed. They are being called into meetings and cussed and abused in those meetings. They are being demoted. They are being challenged. They're being told, don't show up for screening. They're being told, we will humiliate you. We will run you out of office. We will ensure that you have a rough campaign. All of those things being said simply because of association with me. So while I think it is important for things to be discussed with you all, I don't need to discuss those things immediately. I don't need a situation where anybody turns around and says, me or people associated and affiliated with me are causing problems for the sitting government. So I can sit out this erection. I could pull out from Erection2025. I could pull out and let the entire general election take place between now and April 28. And then I will return. So I'm giving you that promise that as of the 29th of April, I will return, and I am unfettered now, because right after the swearing in of the new Prime Minister, I was fired from the Ministry of Finance. So there is no longer any government affiliation. Nobody could turn around and say, she with this ministry, she with that ministry, or anything like that. So that's not on the table, and I am in a position now where I can speak freely. But I am mindful that some people have so much anxiety about their performance and how they're likely to perform that I am not going to start speaking just yet. There are a range of things we need to discuss. That Mark Bassant story today, that's a very serious story. Mark told the story badly because he always tells the story badly. He didn't pull the threads together for you all. But I am aware of a fair amount of things that Mark Bassant talked about in that story. So April 29th, we go in and talk about that Mark Bassant story. April 29th, we go in to talk about all of the things that happened behind the scenes with the transition from Dr. Rowley to Stuart Young. I've given all your full details because I think it is important for the country to know precisely what went on with the vote in Tobago. I think it is important for the country to understand precisely what went on with the transition. I think it is important for the country to know precisely how a range of MPs who were seen as not being in support of one person for leadership and having their opinion of another person for leadership was stigmatized, attacked, and bullied for simply saying, this is who we prefer to see as the next leader for the party. Right? Those things I find incredibly disturbing. But because I want nobody catch a stiffy for me between now and April 28, I am pulling out. Right? So this is my strategic pull-out game. April 29th, we have a date. Okay? So I will see you guys then. Enjoy. The new source page is going to be deactivated for the duration of the elections. So it's no live, no new source page. So that way nobody can accuse me of negatively influencing the election, and they can't attack anybody else, lambaste anybody else, bully anybody else for merely being affiliated and associated with me. Okay? All right, folks. So thank you so much for your attention this evening. It was nice. Always.